So what XHTML would look like is kind of taking this idea of how you structure data and applying it to a web page. And if anybody has ever seen a web page, has anyone ever seen a web page? So. Okay. All right, awesome. So here's a real simple web page. It's just this little table with these four images in it, A, B, C, and D. And so kind of the way that this is represented in XHTML is you have a body, which is kind of the visible part of the document, which contains a table, which is this table of 4 cells. And then that contains 2 rows, which are these TR tags. So this TR here is highlighting the top row there. This TR is highlighting the bottom row there. And then within each of those, you have an individual cell, which is labeled TD, and within each of those, you have an image, which is IMG. There's kind of this distinction between structural relationships, which are represented by having tags nested, and so these attribute relationships, where it's not related to the structure of the document, but it's related to sort of different variations on how an element could appear. So for instance, these lines between the table, so these lines on the outside, the lines in between, there's nowhere in this document where you say you have this row, then a horizontal line, or you have this cell, then a vertical line. You just have in the table tag, you have these attributes that say, for rules, draw lines between everything. This rules equals all, and the frame is box. So draw a box around the entire thing. So that's kind of the general idea of what's going on here. So now kind of the question is, we've talked about how XHTML is a subset of XML, but what makes this document a valid XHTML document versus this one that just happens to kind of conform to these standards, or that kind of looks like it might be a document. So the way that you test that validity is with validity rules. So this is kind of our Venn diagram. XML is this whole big happy universe. XHTML is this small little subset of it. The XML language defines kind of what's a well-formed document. So what has, there's only a single root element, so there's only one tag at the top of the document, and that every tag that you open has a matching close tag, and the things are properly nested. So if I start like this, this is okay because your V tags aren't fully enclosed by these V tags. But this is not okay because this V tag starts within the A tags and closes outside of it. So that's kind of one of the examples of the rules that are enforced by XML. And then you also have a set of rules that define validity. So this is defined in XSD or DTD, which we'll talk about in future lessons, which basically kind of say what are the rules. So saying, okay, well if you have a tag that says this is a table cell, it better be inside of a table row. It's not allowed to have it lying around wherever. We're saying, if you have your entire HTML document, it's got to have a head tag, it's got to have a body tag. This was not in there. Or if you have a tag for an image, you have to have something that points out, what file it's looking at to get that image. So that's kind of a real quick overview of how XHTML fits into, or what it looks like, what it is. So let's talk about how it addresses those issues we talked about up front. So in terms of achieving flexibility, the rules really aren't that restrictive in general. So things like an image tag. There's no rule that says it has to point to a GIF or to a JPEG. It just says it has to point to something. And then you're kind of open for future standards to come out that say, okay, this is a type of image, and for browsers to say, I support this kind of image, and have them work it out. For the most part, it separates presentation from structure. So there's still some things where you have little tags that say this section should be bold or whatever. But that's kind of on the outs, and that's moving away from being accepted, so that you get this nice decoupling of how different browsers render it based on, or from separating that from the actual data that's being conveyed. There are a number of tags that are very generic, like the object tag, which basically says something goes in here, that will let you, have further extensions. And then a little more technical, there's this idea of XML namespaces, which lets you take other formats, like there are other XML-based languages that you could incorporate directly into a web page. So in terms of efficiency, there are really no special rules. It's very regular. Having this nice hierarchical structure also allows you to do things like process pages incrementally. So you reach an image tag, and then you say, okay, whatever, I'll get that later, and you move on and do something else. And then there are measuring standards for kind of these subsets of XHTML, which are specifically meant for low-power devices. In terms of solving the adoption problem, it's kind of nice because we have this previous standard HTML, which is very similar to XHTML. So it's pretty easy to adapt from the old standard to the new standard. Additionally, XML has been used for years in different application areas, and there are lots of utilities and libraries out there for processing it efficiently, so that's a bonus. Content developers know HTML, so it's not that big of a change for them. And then there's this idea of different XSDs, which are the validation rules that have very little enforcement. So some of them will let you use all the presentation elements, like saying this text should be bold, this text should be italic, whatever. And then you have the strict definition, which doesn't allow any of that information in. So you kind of have this gradual trend of adoption from the old way to the new way. So next time we meet, we're going to talk about a little more detail about XML and XSD syntax and semantics, so how you write it and what that means. We're going to go over a couple of the commonly used XHTML tags that you'll be using in the pages that you create. And then we'll talk about the concept of the document object model, which is sort of like we have this data, but how do we actually use it in a programmatic fashion? So, in conclusion, do your homework. Are there any questions?
Okay. Designing a web page? Okay, thanks, Doug.